You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. Bark and Wag is dedicated to protecting our dogs through advocacy, education, and supporting like-minded dog lovers by selling custom pet products. Saving lives by selling collars, scrunchies, and swag. Please check out Bark and Wag's website, barkandwag.com. That's BARKNWAG.com to see the awesome merchandise. Bark and Wag collars and leashes, collar covers, and decorative bandanas are perfect for your pooch. For the owner of the house, we have t-shirts, sweatshirts, long sleeve shirts, hats, and even coasters. We are expanding monthly, so be sure to check back. We love pooch ideas for podcasts and merchandise too, so send an email to polly@barkandwag.com with your suggestions.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking to Dr. Millie Armstrong, veterinarian at Petty Brook Veterinarian Clinic in Vermont. Welcome, Millie.
Thank you. Thank you.
So today I had a question for you, which I feel in the last 5 to 6 years has happened, where when we go to see a vet, the vet will take your dog into the back.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know if it's more because all of the equipment is in the back, or they don't want to see you. You know, I'm just not quite sure. So I just was wondering if you do that, and you know what the reason is.
You know, that's a good question. A lot of times I will do that. I try to do as much as we possibly can in front of the owners in the exam room, because I feel like the dogs are often a lot more comfortable, or the cats are more comfortable with their owners there. And I have a lot of questions I'm still talking to people about in the room. But there are times when I do need some special equipment, or I might need an extra person to help hold the dog or the cat if they're particularly squiggly. And there are times too when the dogs just do better when their owners aren't there. They really are picking up on some of the cues that owners sometimes give. And if the owners are worried about things, say somebody had a hard time getting a blood sample from the dog 3 years ago, and ever since then they've been really worried about giving blood, they can have some anxieties around that. And if we take them out of that environment and bring them out to the back room in the treatment area, a lot of times there's just so much else going on to stimulate the dog and get their attention off of having to give blood, that they're usually a lot more cooperative, if you will. They kind of settle right down, they look around, they see what's going on. Somebody else comes up to pet them and say hi, and it kind of diffuses some of their anxieties. And then we can get the sample we need relatively quickly. Sometimes I need clippers. I need to shave an area to draw blood, and I don't have clippers in every exam room, so I might have to go out back. Or we need special blood tubes that we don't keep in the exam rooms. So there are a couple of reasons. I try to do as much as I can, but every once in a while, and even somebody will say, I think you should take her away from me because she's going to be so responsive. She knows I'm scared, so just take her out. I know she's better. Some people will leave the room on their own because they don't want to watch what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's easier. It just depends on the patient and what we need to have happen. And, or if we're trying to collect a urine sample, we'll take them out back and walk them out in the back fenced-in area so that it takes away the stress from the owners having to reach down and collect that as the dog's urinating. So there are a couple of reasons. It usually isn't related to the fact that we don't want people seeing what's going on. There was that movie Beethoven out a couple of years ago, well, a long time ago, maybe now 10 years ago, where there was a Disney character who was a veterinarian, and he was the villain in the movie. And so when that movie came out, ever since then, the little kids who've seen that movie worry that we're going to be hurt to their dog. So we took a long time to dispel that myth. I noticed kids were really scared whenever I mentioned having to take their friend out back. But I think we've gotten over that, and most people understand. And we have a relatively small hospital, so they can hear what's going on in the back. And, if the dogs are getting anxious or growly or unruly, I'll just come in and say, this just isn't working. So I don't want to hide anything from people. I'm very upfront. And a lot of times people know their own pet and they aren't surprised about the way their dogs behave sometimes. But honestly, they usually do so much better when they're in a different environment, because they're just sort of caught off guard by it, and they look around, they wonder, who's that? And things usually go pretty smoothly that way.
Yeah, and I guess it's based on the personality of the dog. Like our pug, the doctor likes to do everything with me holding because his blood pressure is lower.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And our lab, obviously she'll go anywhere. So it's just, I think it just depends on the dog, but I just didn't know if there was a rhyme or reason for it. But it sounds like it's more just general based on what procedure is being done.
Exactly. And what we anticipate will be the least stressful for the patient. That's the big thing, because we don't want anybody getting so nervous that or scared. We don't want people, or the dogs being scared, the cats being scared. And sometimes I find the less restraint with cats, the better, the least restraint. I know cats can really cause damage when they get upset, but I like to talk with them a little bit and explain what we're going to do. And I find if everything we do to cats is because they let us. And I think if they're part of the decision process and they understand that all we have to do is just shave a little spot, get a little sample, we're done, they can usually cooperate with that. And sometimes I like to sprawl out a little bit when I'm drawing blood, so I don't have as much room in the exam rooms when I'm down on my knees and looking up at the table and feet behind me and elbows all over so sometimes there's just more room to work, and I find sometimes it's easier.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you very much for answering the question, and we look forward to having you back on the podcast.
Oh, I do too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.